A lot of time, the methodology is you bring someone that has fundamental experience. You bring someone with quant experience and put them together and be like, okay, go work out fundamental. I don't believe that's going to work. I personally believe you need to know both. I think of fundamental more as a storytelling. It's a longer term vetting. Quant is very different. Quant is basically, I don't really care about the business itself. I care about the data it's emitting.
Anyone who has a fundamental interest or anyone with a quantitative background, there's ample opportunity to marry, your traditional finance with quant finance.
For sure. Especially in the age of AI, I think both sides become significantly easier to learn.
What's one thing early careers professionals should be thinking about with regards to AI and their careers?
My view is this. I think
there are important similarities between fundamental and quant investing. And furthermore, it's absolutely imperative that on a trading team, the fundamental and quant side both understand in an application, not just theoretical sense, what the other is doing. That and why AI is an accelerator that enables versatile careers are two of my biggest takeaways from my conversation today with Ying Hua, founder and CEO of Implied, an AI-native equity investment research firm. Ying previously worked in investment roles at Goldman Sachs, Citadel, and Balyasny, so her perspective is one to take advantage of. This was a fascinating conversation. Ying, thank you so much for being here today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You have spent part of your career both in fundamental investing and quant investing. What are your views on both and the differences?
Let's talk about similarities first. I think the end goal is the same, right? It's both trying to find alpha in different ways. I think of fundamental more as a storytelling. It's a longer term betting. You're not expecting your thesis to play out in the next hour, minute, or even like a month potentially, right? So it's very much a storytelling. I have all these pieces. I have this management. I have this business model. How will that perform given the big macro environment? So that's kind of how I think about fundamental. Quant is very different. Quant is basically, I don't really care about the business itself. I care about the data it's emitting. And based on the data, I can blindly treat each company differently based on the data adjusting. And I'm looking for specific patterns. But the goal is the same. Can I find alpha in both track? One other difference is I believe fundamental is much more forward-looking. What's different from here? I'm betting on the difference versus quant is much more backward-looking. It's a back test, right? Things have to go exactly like it used to go in order for my best to come true. So those are kind of how I think about it. Same goal, approach a very different way. I believe the future of investing is somewhere in the middle. Exactly in the middle, something that combines both. You both need to understand the road that you came, what pattern will continue to be true, and then you have to think about in the future, what will be different? How will the story evolve? So I believe that's actually going to be the future of investing.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make. Talk to me a little bit about the technical abilities and capabilities, that exist in that Venn diagram, right? It can't just be all conceptual analysis, but it shouldn't, on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, it shouldn't just be all, technical and robotic based. So talk to me a little bit where technical ability plays into what your view of the future of investing is.
I actually think there's common themes about these two skill sets. I still think both are truly kind of, can you think in first principle? Can you think logically? Now, it kind of manifests in different ways, right? A fundamental is kind of like, okay, these are basic skill sets I need to have. I need to know the company very well. I need to know the business model. I need to know the management. Very much like when you play sports, you have to do the individual piece part right. But the actual game, the actual analysis is much more like a art, right? So like, how do I combine all these skill sets I have to make a call? But at the end of the day, it's still very quantitative in a sense that you have to think logically. You have to think about what are the driving forces, first principle, like this happened, hence this is going to happen. And you have to actually still process a lot of, quantitative data. So I would think about like the skill set is actually very similar. On the quant side, I think what's unique about it is you have to be very creative. I think the low-hanging fruits for quants are mostly gone, right? The simple correlations, the simple, okay, this is going to drive that, I think is being solved. So you have to be very creative. And I actually think someone with a fundamental background can do that very well because, there are a lot of, I believe there are a lot of data points that quants typically ignore because historically it doesn't have enough data sample size to backtest. But coming from a fundamental perspective, you know the intuition. You can use data to prove or disprove your intuition. And that's something that's very unique, I think. So I think there's a lot of benefit in kind of you're a system thinker, you're a first principle thinker, you're very logical, you know enough about the quantitative kind of toolkit or methodologies, and you have built intuition on the fundamental side over the years. That skill set is the truly unique one, and I think you can be very creative as a result of it.
I completely see where you're going with that. And it's not this, microscopic niche that only a handful of people can get into. Anyone who has a fundamental interest
Yes.
or anyone with a quantitative background, there's ample opportunity to marry, your traditional finance with quant finance, your modern quant, tech-based finance.
For sure. Especially in the age of AI, I think both sides become significantly easier to learn. I came from a fundamental background. I learned programming via Stack Overflow, right? The pre-AI, the hard way. But I think nowadays, as long as you have an interest, it's very easy, or it's much easier to build out that skill set, to do practice, to test your hypothesis on both sides, quant and fundamental. So I think it's a great opportunity for everyone who's interested on the other side.
Definitely. I agree. So something that you've mentioned previously actually is kind of, keeping with this theme of where quant finance plays into the world of investing, actually leaning more into the automation side or the predictive side of quantitative finance. You've said that a quant investing book size shouldn't be done manually, right? That's actually one element of investing where you should let the data, kind of tell your story. You should let the information, create the world in which you're trying to invest. Talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by that and how you go about that.
Yeah, I think data can drive two decisions, right, in your investment. One is directional. Should I be long, short? One is sizing. How big do I need to be? I actually think there are arguments to be made that data should be driving both of them. One, I believe, should be purely data driven. One should be, some human element to it. The direction side, I think it should be a human decision aided by data. I have a lot of data. I have a hypothesis. I have a view on where the world is going to go, where that company is going to go. Now, because I'm predicting the future, I'm not going to have every single data point needed to help you make that decision, right? So I think there is still a little bit of art in it, in the sense that, okay, I have very strong conviction this is going. I have the supporting detail to tell me that my thesis is not wrong yet, but my conviction is very high. So I think this is, you can think about this, your conviction is an input on which direction you want to be, right? And then you have sizing. I think sizing is an interesting topic because most of fundamental sizing is done through art, right? Kind of, I feel like my conviction is high, hence I'm going to grow that position. But if you actually look at just statistically, most of fundamental PMs are not that good at sizing. Most of their P&L come from directional bets and not sizing itself. And sizing, if you think about it, is, in my view, is much more of a quantitative question, right? Sizing should be dependent on your conviction. That's one input, but there's many other inputs. Positioning. Is this a well-liked name? Has this name already won, right? Volatility. If a ticker is much more volatile, then you don't need that big of a position. All these things are actually things that a quantitative portfolio takes into consideration, right? I think that's actually a much better approach is, during directional bet with human input, just because, again, you're predicting the future, you're not going to have every single data point to support your thesis. So that's more of an art, kind of picking a side. And then positioning done via quantitative methodology. And it's very interesting in Implied, like what we're trying to do is really trying to help you with a little bit of both, right? On one hand, I think fundamental we have a lot of data, and we give investors a lot of tools to kind of run their thesis, to prove their thesis, to do research on the thesis. So that's kind of what we provide on the
Hmm.
fundamental side. On the quant side, a lot of the fundamental PM, I think the challenge is I don't know how to write Python. I don't know. I know that conceptually these are things that matter, but how do I actually run it? And Imply actually has a research capability to run quantitative analysis for you, so that a PM can actually just natural language. This is what I'm thinking. How would you size it? Can you backtest it for me? And you can run that on Imply. So the way I think about Imply is trying to provide the tools that you need to really succeed in both sides.
I love that. I love that. So yes, you kind of let the data guide you, but it's not a full blind faith in it. Well, this is what the technology says, so this is what we're doing. There's still that critical thinking
For sure.
element. There's still that implicit element of the fundamental analysis and the research, and the judgment, as you say, that's required.
For sure. And I think even on the quant side, it's very interesting. Quant, you assume quant means I'm going to let myself go and then just have the machine make all the decision. But in quant, you actually have to make judgment call too. Implicit in when you run a quant strategy, what you're saying is, I believe the future is the same as the past. Hence, whatever pattern I've seen so far will still apply to the future. And then you will see actually when this perform poorly is when regime changes. Things are no longer the same. It's a whole new world. Old pattern doesn't match, right? So even in quant world, I do think there is that judgment of regime is about to change. We need to take down the size. So I think definitely like in both sides, there required some level of judgment call. Maybe the judgment call is different on different topics, but yes, I believe data is purely a kind of a information for you to make a decision.
Yeah. So Implied, the company that you founded, does equity investment research. So to build an AI native research process, which, again, we're staying in the lines of quant finance here, but to build an AI native research process, would you say that whether you're doing AI research or, machine learning research, equity research, other types of investment research, alternative data, is it the same, at Implied that you do in quant finance, or is it different from other types of research, especially in this day and age of AI research, machine learning research, etc.?
Yeah, I definitely think from the outside, it's different, right? But different meaning, mm, during equity research, AI native equity research, we try to solve a few things. Number one is, what is your workflow? Like, let's take an analyst workflow, which is consuming raw data, processing it, make a decision. Those are the three things, right? And in those three things, we figure out what are things we can accelerate, what are things we can automate, so that we can. The goal is to jump to that decision making process a lot faster than you would have. Instead of spending days on this topic, we can spend minutes. So from the surface, I think you will argue it's different because Imply also incorporate a lot of equity specific domain knowledge into it. Like, for example, we build a knowledge base that is a ticker level knowledge base. So when you ask a question about JP Morgan, it will know these are things that matter. These are things that doesn't matter at this given moment. So that's a very technically equity specific setup. That said, I think like any vertical, the components you need to build an AI native research process, whatever research it is very similar, right? One is you want to have an AI to help you accelerate whatever process we're already doing. Everyone has a different process. Like quant research is a different process. Quant research might be go fetch all these paper that just got published, right? And I'm going to review the methodology. I'm going to recreate it with the data I have internally. And then I'm going to run a back test. And so that's their process. But that process can be accelerated too. So any kind of vertical, I think the process can be accelerated. So that's step number one, process. Step number two is data. What data do you need, right? Making sure the data is clean, making sure the data is easily connectable to your AI system. I think that's critical. I think that's actually a part, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. I think a lot of people think, oh, I just, hook up MCP with an AI platform and all of a sudden have all access to data. We actually think that's not the way that it will work. And the last piece is knowledge, domain knowledge. Regardless of what area you're in, you cannot, especially in finance, you can't just rely on the trained knowledge of a horizontal AI, right? Because finance is always changing. What's true yesterday is no longer true today, right? Especially equity, especially. But think about bond, think about whatever it is. The knowledge is always updating. So you cannot rely on generic AI model to be like, okay, this is what you need to do. So you need to build your own kind of up-to-date knowledge. Also, generic knowledge, I think, it's very similar to someone learning how to invest by reading a book. Right, you're not actually going to like just because you read some book doesn't mean you're going to become a really great investor. There's a lot of knowledge you gain from experience, from intuitions you build, things that you learned that you kind of have to distill it and to build a knowledge base so that your AI system can access. So if I think about any platform, any vertical, any kind of area, you require three things: the AI harness that can help you accelerate your process, the data that you need that's required in your process, and the domain knowledge that is required to make that system actually know what you're doing. From that construct, I think every vertical is the same.
Completely makes sense. So I want to pivot the conversation a little bit into thinking about talent and early careers. You've actually been talking about it quite a bit more recently with some recent guests as well. Still kind of on the same track of what we've just been discussing in having the technical skills and the quantitative ability. My first question is that you had a small team of 2 analysts supporting you and your book, and you made both of them learn to code. Why?
When I started at Balyasny, we wanted to test out this fundamental theory of ours, is like the best investment process combines both fundamental and quantitative skill sets. And when you want to hire people, not a lot of people fit both, right? Not a lot of people have fundamental background and then also have technical background. So the thing that we were facing is, do I hire someone from quant background and try to teach them fundamental? Or do I hire someone from fundamental and try to teach them quant background? And I decided to do the latter, purely because that's kind of where I came from. So I kind of know how much quantitative knowledge does each one need to learn to get there, right? So we hired 2 people who are very traditional fundamental banker, equity research, that background, right? And I give them a task, like, you have 3 months to pick up Python. That's kind of about roughly how long it took me. But the mandate is not to be the best programmer, right? That's not practical. What I told them is that you just need to learn enough about the Python to be able to read code that people generate. Number one, read code. So someone give you code, you're able to audit it. Tell me, is this exactly what we're trying to do, or is there something wrong with it? That's number one. Number two is you have to have the intuition to think about, with that knowledge of quant, like Python, you have to have that intuition to think about, how do I build a process that's automated? Right. So kind of a system thinker, okay, now that I know Python can automate these things, I would design these process differently. So those are the two goals. And I think both of them picked up Python very quickly, 3 months, and then both of them achieved that. And I would say, after 3 months, it's not like you actually know Python coding very, very well. And after that, it's more just
Of course.
you can actually pick up an actual project. Everyone, both of them, basically after 3 months, had one project. Each one have different project. And then using that project, you use your knowledge, you test it out, and then it worked out really, really well. So I think the other thing is, when I think about Quantament or using quant to supplement the fundamental process, there are really 3 distinctive parts. And I think most people might think about 1 or 2, right? The very first part is a process, actually, right? Like process. How can I do things faster? So give you a very simple example. Some of the coverage that we have very long supplements during earnings season. So each supplement will be 40 pages. Basically, every number in that 40 pages has to go into your model. So you can imagine doing model annually, how long that'll take. This is before, we didn't use any vendors. It's kind of like, okay, now that we have the knowledge we have, how do we automate this process? So we revamped our model updating process, and it shrank the updating time from 40 to 2 minutes for each company. Right, that's huge during earnings season. You have we were covering like 120 names or something like that, and at each of them is saving you close to 35 minutes is insane. So number one is process. So I think having both of them go through the Python training help them think about it more, how to automate things from day one. That's number one. The second piece is data. Data is actually, I mean, that's the most self-explanatory, right? Data includes alternative data, includes risk data, includes any data that is too large to be processed in Excel. So traditionally, a fundamental investor don't touch that. We gather it and try to use that as piece of as part of our process. And the third part is positioning. That's the piece I talked about before. Is how do we make sure that we don't let our emotion flow into our positioning, right? I'm not adding to position just because I'm freaking out or because, whatever it is. I let the data guide me on my sizing, on the sizing part of the equation. So those are three different things. And for me, it's hard to build a quantamental team if you don't have anyone or you don't have everyone on the team knows both sides. Even if it's like, I know a little bit about this side, I know a lot about this side, whatever it is, you have to know both sides. I have also witnessed in the industry where fundamental, I mean, it's not a new term. It's been pretty popular. Trying to tackle it. I don't know if anyone have cracked the code, but a lot of time the methodology is you bring someone that has fundamental experience. You bring someone with quant experience, can put them together and be like, okay, go work out fundamental. I don't believe that's going to work. I personally believe you need to know both. You need to know both in order to know what is the limitation, what are things you can automate. And then, so that's kind of the approach I took with my team. And that's why I made both of them kind of pick up that same skill set so that they know both. And by the way, I think it's the same argument in the AI world too. I think to truly build an AI native process, it takes someone who knows both sides of fundamental or what the process is, what do investors actually do, and then someone who knows technical side of AI in order to really design a good kind of AI native process. But anyways, it was a really fun experiment, and I'm really glad I did it because I would say the result was much better than expected.
Again, so interesting because, like you say, it might not work out perfectly. Let's say we're putting ourselves in a potential hiring manager's shoes right now, right? And you're building a team. You're not trying to just take the qualitative thinking, theoretical individual and pair them with the applied technical or quantitative individual and say, go figure it, as you just mentioned. Again, that Venn diagram kind of comes into play. Either side needs to have some basic knowledge and fundamental understanding of what the other side's thinking about and how they go about their process so that together they can move forward.
100%. 100%. And then the gap that when you just put the two that knows both sides very well, but you put them together, the gap is in the communication. It's very similar to AI prompting. For example, a fundamental person is trying to describe this process they want to automate. They basically have to present every single little context in order to build it right. If you miss one context, someone will build it. Think about a Python script that the fundamental PM or analyst cannot read. And then they will take the result as is. But the reality could be, oh, you misunderstood what I mean, or there's something I thought you would know, but you didn't. And I think that happens a lot. Like I've actually witnessed it a lot where a PM would be like, hey, I think this makes sense. Intuitively, this is what I'd be observing. And then you give it to Quant, and Quant runs it was like, nope, there's no data. And then most of the time people just take it as is. Like, okay, like the data is how we know. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe I'm reading too much. But a lot of it is actually in that translation, something got missed. And the code is not representing everything the PM is thinking about. So this is why, going back to your earlier question, I want to make sure both of my analysts knows how to read code so they can understand if that's actually expressing what they want. And then two, they can actually system think about, okay, this is how I would design it to prove whether my hypothesis is right or wrong.
I love that. I think it's creative managing. I think it's creative team assembly, right? Team building. And it, of course, the most important part of a team is that it's a unit all going in the same direction. It gets everybody understanding what everybody on the team is intending to accomplish. So I think that's a really interesting experiment, as you mentioned, really interesting experiment that you ran. And I'm so happy that it worked out because I think it's a great case study for others that are out there. So Couple questions more. As you mentioned, these analysts, they were kind of probably junior in your career. What's one thing that maybe junior candidates or early careers professionals should be thinking about with regards to AI and their careers?
My view is this. I think everyone, regardless of you're a junior or senior, should view AI as an accelerator. Take like a step back, like a junior person. I think there is this conception in finance where you're a very junior person, just graduated from school. You're expected to put in 2 years of raw work. Those 2 years, you're expected to just put in hard work, do things that no one wants to do. Potentially do things that are just purely repetitive. Purely, you're not going to learn that much. That's kind of the, at least like as I was going through the finance track, like that was, and no one ever said that that's not the way it should be, right? I think AI is the first opportunity where you'd be like, okay, now I'm given these grunt work. I can actually do these grunt work a lot faster. So what would have taken me maybe 3 years, 4 years to get to a point where I can truly contribute to the team and not just by doing grunt work, I can get there faster. I think that's how all junior person should be thinking about. And actually not just junior. I think senior, true. I think everyone should be thinking about it's just like, what am I doing today that can be accelerated? Once I have that free time, what can I focus on to get me to the next level? That's number one. Number two is like, I think the next question I think naturally to ask about is what's going to happen to alpha in the market? If you think AI is going to get rid of all the alpha, it doesn't matter if I'm more productive or not and whatever. Just there's less opportunity for me. And then it was very interesting because someone on Twitter last week dug up a speech done by Ken. Ken is basically saying that if you look at the days of using alternative data to predict quarterly earnings is over. Right? Like, so there's so much data that, that's basically it's over. But what's interesting is he's not saying that because there's a lot of alternative data, earnings has become easier. He's not saying that there is no alpha during earnings. And we actually hold up the chart. If you look at it, like the volatility, the 1-day volatility of stocks after they report earnings has gone up. We're at like a high right now. So what that tells you is actually, despite having so much data, actually potentially because of so much data, there are more alpha opportunities around earnings than before.
Of course. Yep.
So the way I think about it is like, AI is very similar to, and it's similar to quant actually. Like you can't argue that very short-term alpha has been, captured by the two sigmas and all the great quant shops of the world, but you stretch out the time horizon a little bit and no one has figured it out, right? like we've seen even the best of the best, like trying to do slightly longer term time horizon betting, and that doesn't fully work, right? So our view is AI is going to change the composition of alpha. There's certain alphas can be easier, but AI is by definition will create other alpha as well for people in the market to get. So from a junior perspective, my view is view AI as accelerator. It should accelerate you to get to a point you're truly contributing, and then get you to a point where you can learn things that previously you had to kind of finish the 3 years groundwork in order to learn. You can get there faster. And I also think like you can learn things at a much faster speed. I remember when I was a junior person, some of the most like boring thing I had to read through are like insurance regulation, like tax bills, like literally have to sit down and read like 900 pages. You should probably still read it, but AI can probably accelerate that process significantly. So again, I think the alpha is still there. It will still be there after the AI. I think the path to get to a point where you can get that alpha can be significantly shortened on the junior level. I think also I think one other thing is, looking at our client, I think junior people are much more willing to adopt AI. So I think about like, I think on a given team, usually it's a more junior people who are like the champions of, oh, this is what we can do. This is how we can accelerate this. So I think those are all very unique opportunities for junior to kind of take their career to the next level at a lot faster speed.
Accelerate, such a good word. It's much less, fear mongering of your own career or what's going to come for your job. But instead, if you just lean in a little bit, you can use it to your advantage to accelerate your own career, your own knowledge. I think that's such a good operative word for this. That's fascinating take. Love it. And I think you've also addressed a little bit that, people are willing to lean in on the grunt work, as you've put it, and maybe it can condense their timelines, right? As you say, maybe 4 years becomes 2 years, maybe a 3-week project becomes a week. The more that these individuals can show that capability as a skill, the more you're starting to stand out as well, right? It's not just a matter of it's not a matter of being seen as lazy or being afraid that your job's gone. Actually, you're proving productivity and more efficiency, which is what everybody who's more senior than you wants to see in junior and early careers candidates anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So for those who have known that they've always wanted to be in finance, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but do you think AI can help people do that more rather than them being afraid that it's going to, take their jobs, kind of what we've just talked about?
Totally. I think this is very important, actually. I think there is a distinction, right? Like, if finance is where you want to be, which vertical finance you want to be, you can actually use AI to jumpstart your career. All the things that you would have had to spend, again, the first few years to learn, you can jumpstart that. I think that's very important. I think it's a little bit trickier if you're like, I don't know what I want, right? I don't know what I want, because I think, again, I like to say, like, AI is like an autonomous car. It can drive you anywhere it wants to go, but you kind of need to know where you want to go. So this is why I think it's a lot easier for someone who know this is where I want to do. Both sides benefits, but I think definitely for the people who know, I've always dreamed to go to be a banker, whatever it is, as long as you know that, what's required of you knowledge-wise, I think you can accelerate it. The other thing I actually think, even if you don't know what you want to do, I think one of the benefits of AI is you can get to knowledge pieces a lot faster. And I think there is something of value to be said about, like, if you're very good at retaining that knowledge, like, right, you should outsource the work to AI. You should not outsource understanding to AI. AI is there to help you understand things, help you understand business model, understand process, whatever it is. But you can have AI get you there faster. And you can collect all those understanding in your head. I actually think it makes you much more versatile too, right?
For sure.
So I think everyone should treat AI as less about a threat, more about an enabler and accelerator. And I think there's still so much knowledge to be learned in the world. And I'm hoping like, AI should be able to push people more aggressively to get there. So I think it should be a very exciting future for young people.
I think that's a perfect place for us to finish up the conversation. You just used another word that really stuck with me. So the first one obviously being accelerate, but you just use versatile as well, right? And I think back to the example that you gave about both people on your team coding. Rather than them staying in their own lanes and working together, talking together, if they're doing a little bit of what the other is doing, all of a sudden they're more versatile. And I think about the same thing here, right? If you become better with tech and tools, if you use it to help you with your grunt work rather than eliminate your own productivity, you've made yourself more versatile, not just efficient, which is the word I chose, more versatile as well. So I think that's great. Those are two really big takeaways for me. So thank you for providing your perspective.
Of course.
Any last words? I think, this is your show, your opportunity to have the last word based on what we've talked about today, because I think you've done a great job explaining, what your viewpoint is.
Yeah, I think it's just one of the most interesting period of time in our lifetime. I think everyone should take advantage of it. I think we should see knowledge accelerate meaningfully. We should see significant efficiency gain in our industry. But I think more importantly, I think everyone can treat this as an opportunity to make themselves better, to get to what you want to be faster. So yeah, I think it's one of the most exciting time ever, and hopefully everyone feels the same.
Wonderful. We'll end there. Ying, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your viewpoints. And I hope everyone that listens applies them because they are profound and applicable.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.